Next guest is Dr. Debbie Zacarian. Debbie is known for her expertise in strengths-based leadership, policy analysis, instructional practices, and partnerships with culturally and linguistically diverse student and family populations. With over 3 decades of combined expertise as a district administrator, university faculty member, and educational service agency leader, she founded Zacarian and Associates and has been providing consulting and professional development throughout the United States. She has written many books, including top and best-selling more than 100 journal articles, as well as district and state policies focused on leadership, strategic planning, and analysis, and instructional practices with diverse learners, including multilingual learners and students living with adversity. Welcome to the podcast, Debbie.
Thank you, Dana. Great to be here.
We'll start off with the question I ask everybody. Tell me about a time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
So I thank you for asking that question. And it's one that I think of a lot, especially when I work with districts who've been found to be out of compliance with its multilingual learners. It often begins with sharing how overwhelmed they feel with what to do and how to make it work. So, that feeling of, gosh, I don't know what to do, or I hear this, we can't do this, or some statement that expresses that feeling of really being overwhelmed. So we all experience that in education, no matter what we do. And I appreciate your question. For me, it's about helping districts, schools, public and public charter schools, move out of the trenches, just as educators do, help multilingual learners feel safe, feel a sense of belonging, feel a sense of value, feel a sense of competence, and of course, the confidence to speak up for themselves and on behalf of others. So if we take it in small steps and take it in ways that we all feel we can really do it, so much happens that works. And that's sort of a way of thinking about getting out of the trenches for me.
Yeah, really important, especially when you're working with schools that have a large number of multilingual learners and need to remain in compliance. So let's talk about a few of your recent books. We can start with Transforming Schools, a multilingual learners, a comprehensive guide for educators, second edition. Talk to me a little bit about how that would help schools, especially those who have recently had a large influx of MLLs.
Yeah, well, that's a great question because I was one of those people. Many, many decades ago, I was working for a district, and this wasn't my field. I didn't have my doctorate in, I hadn't done research in it, I hadn't been a professor. I was working as a counselor in a high school, and the district got impacted by a group of refugees. And because I'm a child of an immigrant, and my principal knew that, he thought I'd be good working with multilingual learners. So I had no idea about what the laws were, what the regulations were, what to do, how to how to teach someone English or any of that.
Mm-hmm.
So through meeting with the State Department of Education in my own area, local representative, and neighboring school districts, I learned how to sort of welcome new students and so forth. And the students did really well. So very quickly, I started being asked to go to other districts. And the reason they did well was they had high levels of literacy in their first language, and they were really welcomed by the school and many, many others. And we worked as a team, really helped the students feel those attributes of feeling welcome. They felt safe, sense of belonging, all of that. And
Mm-hmm.
it led to my thinking about, boy, do I wish I had had policies and practices and I wasn't so reliant on everyone around me to tell me what to do. So it led to my getting my doctorate in this field, doing research in this field, and so on and so forth. And I started working with districts. They had heard about the success that we had, and I started writing policies many, many years ago. And it led to me realizing after writing about 30 policies for suburban and urban and rural districts that it would be really helpful to have a kind of guidebook that would help all of us. So I had written another book with a very well-known writer, Judy Haynes, on teaching content across the teaching English learners across the content areas.
Mhm.
And I approached a publisher about a book that would be for administrators initially around what do the laws say? What's the research say? What would be helpful policies and practices for schools to use in their own context? And that first book came out around 2011. And it became very popular. Lots of universities used it who were training educators to be administrators of public schools and teachers in public schools of multilingual learners. So the book came out in 2011. It was based on two federal studies that had been done about what works and the laws. And around 2020, 2021, my editor contacted me and said, there's been so many changes in the laws and in the practices. We'd really like a second edition. And many schools that I was working with at the time wanted to know the newer laws and regulations, and it led to writing a second edition of that book. But the second edition, unlike the first one, is really meant for administrators, teachers, specialists, really anyone who works on behalf of multilingual learners. And it covers big questions like who are multilingual learners and who are we as educators and what are the laws? What are practices that have been found to be successful? What's this component called English language development? What's content development? What should that look like? How do I discern between learning disability and learning difference? How do I work with families? And, really important topics that people want information on. And so the book came out last in 2023 in I think the spring season. And again, I've been speaking across the country and invited to work with districts who are working with both large and small numbers of multilingual learners.
Hmm. And like you said, it's more of that guidebook than for anybody who works with multilingual learners in terms of knowing policies down to just addressing needs, especially if they have not worked with quite as many multilingual learners in the past. So looks like, yeah, a lot of work went into that update. I did want to also talk about the book that you wrote, co-wrote with Margarita Espinoza Calderon and Margot Gottlieb, Beyond Crises, Overcoming Linguistic and Cultural Inequities in Communities, Schools, and Classrooms. Um, how, um, how did you address crises and really that culturally and linguistic inequity in that book with those co-authors?
Yeah, that's well, first of all, I love writing with Margarita and Margot, and it was really an honor to work with the both of them. And we've written, other publications together, and they're one of my favorite teams to work with. So that's a first thing. That book came out as a result of timing, in a sense. Our editor at Corwin contacted us, and it was during COVID, and every school across the nation and the globe was experiencing the pandemic and not really sure what to do because so much was being impacted, including multilingual learners, around how to provide a high quality education during this really un, unexpected, unparalleled time in history. So we really wanted to write a book not necessarily about the pandemic, but the reality that so many multilingual learners experience high levels of crises. So many are, if half of our nation's students, and this is from the National Survey of Children's Health, half of all students experience adverse childhood experiences in the form of abuse, neglect, or household challenge. So if half of the nation's students are experiencing that, what about multilingual learners? Is anything that they're experiencing distinct from their peers? And although they're definitely part of that 50%, many multilingual learners are also or have or are also experiencing adversity, including the long, arduous journey to the United States from uh, perceived or actual fear of living in a conflict and war zone, a natural disaster. Many of them have fled their home country due to a variety of reasons, and they come here as either undocumented citizens or are born here as citizens, but live with families who are undocumented and live in constant fear of deportation. And there's just such a high level of multilingual learners experiencing crises in so many ways that we thought a book that would really address, well, what could we do to really help students be members of their classroom, their school, and their local community in terms of all the curricular and extracurricular out of school, during school, out of school, after school activities that English fluent peers participate in. So that book has three sections. How can students be, or multilingual learners, be really part of the community, the school community and the local community, and what would that look like? How can they be part of the school community and what would that look like? And what about the classroom? And that's the third section. And we interviewed various people from across the country, both principals, superintendents, teachers, specialists, and so forth. And every chapter includes examples from the field about how can we do this to make it work. And we contacted them during the pandemic where we found out some really rich and wonderful information that we wanted to share with readers around what are people doing that's working. And it was a wonderful experience.
Mhm. And it sounds like, although that was written during a time of crisis, that is definitely something we can use today and into the future. Like you said, it's very relevant with the ACEs these students are living with, whether it's the experience living in their home country or that fear within their home or their family of the fear of deportation, et cetera. So, sounds like really connecting our students and our parents as well, the multilingual learners' parents, with communities, and also just having them feel a part of the school as a whole.
Yeah, that was a big part of it. It's, really, if we want schools to work well, then we want to partner closely with families. And that was a very, very big part of the book of what are places doing? Why is that so important? What does the research say? And it was really wonderful to contribute that type of thinking that because a lot of school districts across the country are really working very closely with families and partnering with them. And why not learn about how to make that work? And so it was really a pleasure to
Sure.
understand the research and then speak with districts that were actually, doing it in a big way, which I really, really appreciated.
I also wanted to talk about some policy laws and regulations you wrote for a site that I'd used since I was first certified as culturally linguistic diverse education, as we call it here in Colorado. So you wrote some policies, and that's for the site Polluted Colorado. And
Okay.
people outside Colorado use that as well, and I'll put the link in the show notes. You said this one is from 2011 and you're working on an update right now.
Yeah, in fact, Lydia Bryseth who really is amazing, um, asked me to write a new edition. And for your audience who might not know, a lot of the laws and regulations regarding multilingual learners came um, about 50 years ago when many different actions were taken in our country as a result, and their purpose was really to provide all students with access to an education. So during the civil rights movement, there were a lot of court cases that were brought about to really help students have equal access to an education and that promise of opportunity. So the original Coloring Colorado publication was written about, well, what are the laws? Why is it so important to know them? And what do I do to enact those in my particular district? But since that document was written, and it somewhat covers the Civil Rights Act, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001. In 2015, we had two big events the Every Student Succeeds Act, which amended the Elementary and Secondary Education Act and reinforced that promise to provide all students with equal opportunities to an education. And that Elementary and Secondary Education Act really looked at, I'm sorry, Every Student Succeeds Act really looked at, well, what types of legal responsibilities should every school have around its multilingual learners in terms of establishing standards to ensure their success. And in 2011, it was based on the No Child Left Behind Act and its predecessors. But this new one that's coming out soon is based on the two big events, the Dear Colleague letter of 2015, written by the Department of Justice and the Department of Education, who wrote every public school and every public charter school and every state education agency in our country, reminding them of the laws and obligations that they have to educate the nation's rapidly growing population of multilingual learners. So it's based on that Dear Colleague letter, which has 10 reasons that many districts are not in compliance. So they write about what are the 10 common reasons that we find districts to be out of compliance. And they talk about that, but this new publication that Lydia and I are revising, or this one that you reference that we're revising, really looks at what are the 10 most common reasons and what should I know about that as an educator so that I can follow the laws. And we cover all 10. We talk about various examples of what that looks like in practice. And we talk about here are some remedies to make sure that you're following the laws and regulations. And here are some protocols and tools that you can use to kind of do a check and see, am I following this? What kinds of things can I do to help me stay in compliance and help students be successful? So it's based on the Dear Colleague letter and the Every Student Succeeds Act of 2015.
Will
And of
those
course, what's been found
updates?
to work, what's been
Okay.
found to work.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Those updates be out.
Well, I finished doing some of the last edits yesterday.
No.
So I have a feeling it's going to be out uh, by the end of the year, I think, at least.
Oh, great. I also wanted to mention a few of the other things that you do I didn't mention in the bio. So, you were the founder and director of the Center for English Language Education and Advancing Student Achievement for the Collaborative for Educational Services at the University of Massachusetts Amherst.
Well, actually, I taught at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. And while I was teaching there, I was also an administrator at public school. And so one of the largest or the largest educational service agency reached out to me and asked me if I would come and work for them. And they wanted to create a center to
Mhm.
provide professional development and consulting. So I thought, do I really want to go and do that kind of work? And I thought, yes, I do. So I left the university, I left the district. I went over to the Educational Service Agency where I helped districts write policies all over the state and beyond. Um, that's when I wrote the first edition of the Coloring Colorado as well. I was
Mhm.
working for the collaborative, and I had the privilege, and I mean privilege, of working with thousands of educators in terms of providing professional development and consulting around working with the really rapidly growing group of multilingual learners.
Mhm. And so that's been quite a while since you left the university, and you've been working as a full-time consultant.
Yep. Yep. I worked for the Educational Service Agency. I worked for the university for over a decade. And I worked at the Educational Service Agency for about 6 years, and I was traveling quite a bit, still writing
Mhm.
a lot of books. And I went on my own about uh, 8 or 9 years ago and have been working on my own, doing the same kind of work, writing policies, or co-writing policies with districts, consulting with districts, and state education agencies, and doing some work outside of the US. and continuing to write and present.
So coming up in early next year, do you have any conferences that you'd like to highlight that you're presenting at? I know WIDA is coming up as a time of recording, but in February, March or so of next year.
Yeah, well, I'm doing a lot of presentations for large public districts, which is not a national event. I'm doing some virtual events, which I'm losing track of what I'm doing. WIDA fell, and some of the other national conferences fell during times when I'm engaging in family celebrations, so I'm not doing WIDA this year. Um, and I won't be at TESOL or the other big conferences. This is a year of my own family celebrations of weddings and so forth. So um, people can find me online where I'm doing a lot of virtual presentations, and I am working with some districts, but those won't be, available for um, beyond the districts. But I'll have to email you when I'm doing these virtual trainings because there are some that will be available. And with Colorine, I believe Lydia and I will be doing podcasts around the laws and regulations. There was also a three-part series that, if you're a member of the AFT or the NEA,
Mhm.
I co-wrote a book on identity safety with a scholar named Becky Cohn Vargas. And that group did a wonderful three-part series on what does it really take to support students to feel that sense of safety and belonging and so forth. And in it, we interviewed 29 people who are both students, parents, scholars, professors, and adults who experienced, I want to say, threats to their own sense of safety and so forth, but through being bullied or discriminated against. And the book really talks about this concept of what is identity safety? What does it mean? How can schools really be successful in partnering with families to help students feel that sense of um, accomplishment and competence and feel good about themselves and have a positive sense of identity. And that publication is available on the web, and it's being used as a way to really help schools think about, well, what kinds of things can we do to support not just multilingual learners, but any student who might be of a different race, a different religion, a different ethnicity, a different gender identity. How can we really support students to feel identity safe? And I can send you the link for that as well.
Okay, thank you. That would be helpful. So we've had a great conversation today about your work, some of the books that you've written around supporting multilingual learners and their families, and just what drives you as an educator. We're doing this work. Out of everything we've talked about today, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
I think about this a lot. What I'd love for any one of us to remember is that we cannot do this work alone. If for many, many reasons, educators have been sort of hidden away in a silo. We close our classroom door, or we close our office door, or we end up really worrying about our work by ourselves. And it's not just the research and the US Department of Education telling us we should form work groups, but it's really the reality of when we do this together, when we don't work in a silo, but when we work together, students do better and we do better as educators. So if there's one thing I would say is find someone or a group of people that you really feel have the interest in working together and that you can partner with. And it may be someone that you'd be surprised. It could be a school officer, it could be someone in the office, could be a principal, it could be really anyone. But keep building on those partnerships, and we'd be very happily surprised at how much that can mean for all of us in terms of helping students to not just flourish in school, but flourish in their lives as well.
And it's really important to remember it doesn't have to be a colleague who teaches the same subject. It could be a classified staff member, anybody who touches the lives of students. Well, where can people connect with you and find you online?
Well, Anyone would like to reach out to me, I'm available online. My website is zacarianconsulting.com. You can reach out to me just like you did, and I'm happy to support and connect with people. Just give me a shout out, have a look at some of what I've written about. If that's of interest to you or you have questions or comments, please reach out. Happy to communicate.
Right. Well, thank you for being on the Out of the Trenches podcast. It was a pleasure talking with you, hearing a little bit about your work. And I encourage listeners who are interested in hearing more, reaching out to you.
Thank you.